Hello. Thank you for joining us for Programmers Week and attending my talk in particular. I'm going to be going through leveraging Jmax for easier Java automation. So just before we get into anything too deep, I just want to give you a little bit about myself. So for those of you who may not know me, I'm Dustin Luhmann. I'm a senior quality engineer at Cognizant Softvision, where I develop and maintain automation, and I have been here for over 5 years now. I'm the co-architect of the open source automation framework Jmax. That's what we're going to be going through today. And just a quick little caveat, we're going to be going through one automation framework at Jmax, but there's a ton of options out there. A lot of the benefits I'm going to mention can apply to any framework out there. Well, maybe any is going a little too far, but a lot of automation frameworks out there as well. So if I'm covering something that Jmax might have, there's a possibility there's another framework that offers that as well. So also, I like to blog occasionally about Kiwi and automation practices kind of across the board. I don't have enough time to blog, I feel, but the website down here is my blog. And then just a fun fact about me, I guess, is I love both applied and abstract mathematics. So I'm really excited to talk about Jmax and automation frameworks in general, and encourage everyone to share your questions in the chat module. We will get to the questions probably near the end, but feel free to ask and we'll go through them later on. But before we start talking about Jmax, I want to begin just a little bit higher up. Where do we even start when we're going to start developing automation? Well, that's kind of the grand question. And luckily, this is kind of an easy one, right? We need to begin somewhere, but where are we going to start? Well, something that you might want to do beforehand is research, right? We're going to need to know a lot of things before we start developing automation. Automation is not just this magic thing everyone knows how to do and exactly what we even need to automate when we're starting an engagement, right? It could be very hard to even determine what needs to be automated. Testing every manual test for a lot of engagements is, not in our scope. We need to use our time wisely and automate things that should be automated. So before we even start, we need to do some research. We need to figure out what exactly needs to be automated. What language do we want to leverage? Things like that. All that should basically be done before we even starting to develop automation to set us up for success. Otherwise, we're going to be in for a really, really long struggle, I feel. And then after we do our research, we start kind of gauging what we need to do for the engagement, things like that. That's when you want to start developing a plan for automation. This should be the point where you're basically outlining everything best you can with the information you have, right? We need to set the scope. We need to properly identify all the targets that we need to test. Even things like, what kind of technologies and licenses do we maybe have to get before we even start automating? If you want to run up in the cloud with something like Browser Stack or Sauce Labs, we should probably plan for that ahead of time. And now we're getting into kind of where I want to spend a lot of time talking about. So we need to, at some point, start developing our automation. We can't just leave that out and just plan for the rest of forever. We need to eventually start doing some work and providing value and mitigating that risk. So, after we do all that research and the planning, we need to start. But what exactly needs to be done? Well, I kind of want to go through what I believe is like an example that probably pops up quite a bit in the market. And this is probably very simplified, and we are probably only going to kind of cover parts of each of this, but let's just kind of throw an example out there. So first of all, let's assume we want to automate hundreds of existing manual test cases that already exist. So we're trying to bring automation into a project that has been going for a while, and they have been doing a bunch of manual, and they want to add automation to add that value to kind of maybe speed up regression, hit targets, bring that feedback loop faster, all the joys of automation out there. So and on this project, these manual test cases largely go through the functional flow of the web application. So we're going to be dealing with web browser testing and APIs. In this example, I'm not going to go into databases. Let's just look at the API testing, but this example could get really big fast, right? You can test a lot of things on a project. So just for Selenium alone, let's kind of break it down of things we're probably going to need to do. If we're starting from zero, we want to start developing automation. What are some things on our checklist that we need to start ticking off before, we can say we started developing automation? It's not as easy as, opening up a programming tool and start writing a bunch of C# code and saying, yes, we've automated it. There's a lot more that goes into it. So just looking at the web app, let's start there. Well, I'm going to assume we're going to use Selenium here. That's a pretty widely adopted tool. So first thing you're going to have to do is set up Selenium. Luckily, this one's actually pretty easy, almost in any language you're going to use. So we just need to get the library for Selenium up and set up in our project. And the next thing we're probably going to have to do is we want to initialize the driver and create a base test class to avoid redundancy. So we're going to be testing a lot. If we're browser-based testing, we're going to be kind of, creating a driver and hitting a browser for every single test, right? The simple way of doing that would be, copying and pasting code in every single class and, setting up the driver every single time the same way and just copying and pasting that code. Well, the more correct way of doing that is, setting up a base test class or setup method somehow that allows you to get your driver the same way, and you can override it, things like that. Just cut out that redundancy, right? We're going to have to do something like that to create good automation. We're also probably going to need to introduce some smart wait methods. UI testing can be pretty fragile, especially if we're waiting for a ton of things, right? The web page could be super responsive, depending on what you're doing. They could be loading some things as the page is actively live, some asynchronous loading. So we're probably going to need at some point some pretty smart wait methods, and we probably don't want to throw thread sleeps all across our automation, right? So we want to probably create some methods that better smartly wait and retry when trying to find out if elements are clickable or visible or what have you. And then we're probably also going to want to implement some sort of web firing driver for improved logging and reporting. And this doesn't have to be event firing. You could probably write your own custom log messages, things like that. But we're going to want better logging than just kind of what the error messages as our automation ends is going to give us when something fails. We probably want a pretty good log walking through exactly what we did, what the state of the page is, screenshotting, things like that. We want as much information after a test fails as possible for better debugging, better bug reporting. So we're probably going to need to add that. Selenium's not going to have that necessarily out of the box. And even just implementing the event firing driver, we're probably going to need to kind of write some more custom code around that as well to make it readable and exactly how we want for our reporting. Also, we're probably going to need some sort of cleanup methods to kill hang sessions, things like that. You're going to need to clean up some sort of your testing, whether it's data or what have you. And in that, we're probably going to want to make sure, our drivers are properly killed off, that we're not creating a bunch of sessions and not ever ending them. So that's something we're probably going to want to do as well. And that's already a lot of things I'm mentioning just for Selenium, right? And this is only kind of the surface level. There's a ton more I can cover of like kind of good practices when you're trying to set up Selenium automation. But that's only half of this example I put in. So let's even look at, cool, we now kind of know what we want to do for web. Now I also want to start writing automation for APIs as well. So APIs, well, let's just assume we're kind of creating a web driver to kind of send those post puts, all that at endpoints. And we're just going to say we have a wrapper using some sort of library to hit those endpoints. So we're going to need to create that wrapper using the WebDriver so we can cut out some of the repeated stuff. Like we're probably going to have authentication if we're hitting some APIs, right? There's probably some public APIs that we can hit, but more often than not, I find you're going to have to authenticate before sending a bunch of data at APIs. So sticking all the auth headers, things like that, into the driver, we probably want to encapsulate in something as well, so we don't have to repeat that. Also, we're probably going to want to create our own custom methods using that wrapper for more readable test cases. You can write pretty easily, like hitting endpoints and getting everything back, but there can be a lot of kind of slog and bloat into your tests that will make it kind of unreadable if you don't create better encapsulated methods to kind of help with that. Posts can actually look pretty long if you're just kind of doing it straight. So you probably want to create a method to post and do all that depending on how your project is doing, that sort of stuff. And then we're probably also going to want to create methods to, check the HTTP status code and get the body out. That can also get into a long sort of process, and sometimes you want to check the status code first to make sure it was a success before you try to deserialize. Things like that can be very helpful to make your automation easier to understand. And then we've already covered the two things in my example, but I'm kind of leaving out, and maybe some of you also have thought, oh, I would also want this. Well, there's some things that we probably want to do no matter what we're testing, right? If we're developing an automation framework, there are things that no matter what the test is, we're probably going to want this functionality. And I want to cover a couple of them that we're also going to have to do, even if we're just supporting web UI and web services. So we probably want to create configuration files and some utilities to properly grab, use them, maybe even override them, things like that, because automation should be highly configurable. Like a concept of run settings, passing in optional parameters if you're running on like the CI server, things like that. We want to be configurable. We want to easily change things, right? We don't want to hard code a bunch of endpoints in or environments, things like that. We want to be able to pass them on and easily grab them in our automation so it's easily readable, things like that. That's going to take some setup to make sure it's clean and well designed. Also, we probably want to create a utility class that is going to log those details. I mentioned the event firing driver. We're probably going to want that almost no matter what we're doing, right? We need to kind of create a custom log across all of our testing so our reporting is nice and neat. So that way, if you open up a Selenium log, hopefully it looks a lot like your web service log, things like that. You want it easily done across the board. And then just the overall design of the project, right? Oh, we have, our web UI, we have our web services. Sometimes you might want to, set up or create test data on the fly when you're testing in the UI. And it'd be great if you could just use that code that you already had. You could just connect to a database, stick some stuff in there. Sometimes that's the better approach. But if you already have code for something like the API, sometimes that can be a good solution too, right? So if you design your framework well from the very beginning, you can have a cohesive experience against all your testing kind of approaches, right? So if I have our web UI and I want to leverage our APIs at some point, I totally have that option. It should be able to kind of work seamlessly together. You're creating this and you're able to use them together for a much better testing approach. And I've covered a lot all right? And I've only kind of covered 2 testing approaches and some good best practices, basically, right? And that's a lot of things we're gonna have to do in order to even basically say we're developing automation. That's a lot to set up. And what we've kind of seen across the industry is that these common problems, we're going to need to answer them from engagement to engagement, right? I'm sure if anyone's been on multiple automation engagements, you probably have kind of repeated work across different projects, right? And some of those things, especially if they're in setup, before you start really changing and making custom code for a project, is going to look really similar. You want to do kind of the same things. There are those good practices that really no one can really go against, especially in the setup period. We want good automation, and that startup piece can be really important to set that up. So, all right. So, how long is getting to that point going to take from scratch? Well, it can be a really long commitment. And like I said, the decisions you make early on will greatly affect the quality of your automation in the long run. I'm sure someone somewhere out there has taken a shortcut setting up their automation early on, and it's really come back to bite them later. They're going to have a big tech debt, or the automation is going to be really hard to maintain in the long run because some of the decisions they made when they're even setting up the tooling to work with what they want is going to be a big impact. So we want to set up good quality automation sooner rather than later. But so the time spent setting up the automation is very important. We don't want to speed that up just so we can develop test cases, right? But every second we spend trying to set up a framework is basically delaying when the automation and the real work can start, right? We have that goal of automating hundreds of manual test cases, right? In this example, we probably want to start getting to those sooner rather than later so we can start reducing the risk and showing the value of automation. So the sooner we can do it, the better. But we said the setup can take a really long time to do right. Well, luckily, instead of starting from the scratch every single automation project, we can just jumpstart that process and start basically with all that setup work largely done. So, and this is finally where we're getting into talking about JMAQS, a word I said way early on, but we haven't really talked much about. So before I get any further, let's kind of look at that. So what exactly is JMAQS? So JMAQS is a modular test automation framework, okay? So I've kind of alluded to and talked a bit about automation frameworks, but really what it is, it's a way that we can jumpstart our automation so we're not starting from scratch every single time. So a framework should have different modules that we can use and basically pull them in to basically start web UI testing, our first example here, with Selenium, basically with all the work done or largely done. We're going to need to configure it in create page models, things like that. No framework you're going to download is going to have custom code written for your application. That'd be great, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Maybe AI will get there, but who knows? So JMAQS is a module framework that has different modules. So we have web UI, and we leverage Selenium for that. So we're using Selenium, which is a very widely adopted tool for web UI testing. Also, going with our examples before, we have web service testing as well. And we're going to use a web driver, and we basically wrap it, and we're going to be able to hit endpoints and do all that data stuff that I basically said we wanted to do in our example before. JMAQS has all that kind of already built into it. Also, we have mobile app testing using Appium. We build our framework to kind of leverage a ton of the code that Selenium uses, that our Selenium modules use to also work on Appium. And that's kind of exactly how that should be done, right? Because Appium is already built off of Selenium. So a bunch of our kind of logic and terminology, things like that, we try to kind of keep them in line. So if you're working with the JMAQS Selenium and the JMAQS Appium, they should be looking pretty similar and work kind of well together. Also, databases using Hibernate. So Hibernate is an ORM. So not going super in detail, but that's basically being able to take database results and queries and things like that and sticking them in a Java object. So it's very easy to work with, right? So we can basically pull in like thousands of employees, for example, and then we can easily get the properties of the employees out. We can find the names and things like that very easily with something like Hibernate. So that's a great library, and setting up can take a bit of work, right? But JMAQS has a lot of that already built in for you. So you can just start leveraging that sooner. And then Gherkin, BDD, something like that, is getting pretty popular. I feel like I see it more and more in the industry. So we have a module for that using Cucumber, and you're able to kind of easily start getting to that point that we can create feature files and link them to our tests and have that even sooner, which in my opinion, in BDD projects, people want to get to that point pretty quickly. So being able to kind of show that sooner can be pretty beneficial. So that's exactly what JMAQS has. Let me kind of give you a little bit more. So JMAQS is open sourced and it's actively being maintained. Some frameworks out there, and once again, JMAQS is not the only framework in the world that does this, but there's other frameworks out there that might not be fully maintained, might use maybe some different technologies, be it good or bad, right? So it's open sourced and we actively maintain it, and we're developing and improving it as we go. Also, we leverage Maven and Maven archetypes for easy project setup. In a very little bit here, I'm going to kind of demo how easy it is to set up a project using JMAQS, and using those Maven archetypes and Maven itself to easily set up a project makes it very clean. And I guess I would feel surprised if I've never seen an automation framework before or really used Maven archetypes, how easy it can be. And then we support TestNG fully out of the box. I'm going to be running some tests here soon. TestNG is what we're going to use. And we're going to be able to basically start running tests in less than a minute, probably. So I now explained a lot about what is JMAQS, why use JMAQS. So just as a final caveat to all this, why use JMAQS is a better question is why use an automation framework, right? Why do you want to use a framework versus starting from zero? Well, I hope that's getting clear with all the kind of examples I'm giving, but you just want to jumpstart your automation testing, right? You want to avoid rework across different automation engagements. We want to get to that finish line. We want to constantly start. We want to immediately start providing value with our automation, right? The longer you have automation, the easier it is to kind of set up that history of regression and start that feedback loop for the development team to better improve the quality, right? So we want to get to that point as soon as possible. So that should be the number one reason why you want to use a framework like JMAQS, to get to that point of testing faster. And like I said, common problems we already solved with JMAQS, or solved in air quotes, right? Everyone can have different approaches, but common problems should be built into your framework. If you download this framework and start using it, you don't have to solve the simple things that you might have to do in every engagement. You're already past that point. And JMAQS is highly configurable and has detailed logging. I'll kind of show you both those just very briefly. There's a lot more to like configuration and logging that you can go into in JMAQS, but I feel like that's a very big selling point for JMAQS, and I'll show you that very shortly. But configurable, log, and good logging. I don't ever want to work on an automation framework that isn't good at both of these, right? You want it to configurable, and you want to be able to have great logs so you can actually pinpoint to problems and find things easier. And then JMAQS leverages popular and supported technologies, and we try to stay current. Good example is the web services, right? Java was updated recently, and they added more support with a different driver to hit endpoints, and we start supporting that and upgrade to using the more current and relevant technologies. Everything I kind of said we're using, hopefully you're hearing it in, you recognize the technologies, you've maybe used them or seen them. So we're staying popular, we're staying current, we're staying relevant, right? So I've talked about it a lot. Let's just kind of jump right into it. So I'm gonna close on my screen, and hopefully everyone can see super well. But really quick here, let me just show you the GitHub repository. So the first step, if you want to use Jmax, is go to the GitHub here, start following along and kind of learning. We have initial info here, but we also have documentation. I'll show you that a little bit more in a bit. But since we're in Maven, I'm just going to jump right into it. So I'm going to be using Intellij for this example, but really any IDE works. You can use a text editor, things like that. Intellij is just my choice right now because it's pretty, it works pretty well with Maven and things like that. So I have Maven here. So let me, to make this easier, so we don't have a white background on white background, I'm going to click new project, and you'll probably be brought to the Java at the start, but you should have a Maven tab here. And all you have to do is create from archetype, click that. And you're probably not going to have Jmax in here. We don't ship with IntelliJ, right? But you can add an archetype. So I'm going to fill the info in here for you. So the group ID is always going to be this com.magenic jmax.archetypes. That's just always going to be the group ID. And we have a common naming convention for the Selenium, for the archetypes, I mean. So Jmax-Selenium. Our first example, we're going to be using the Jmax archetype. And then for version, let me kind of show you how you'd get the version. So you probably want the latest version. I would almost always just double check that when you're starting a brand new project that you have the latest version or that you're targeting it. So if you go to basically the repository and search under the Magenic here, you're going to find the archetype, and you just want whatever the latest version is, basically. So you can see here that it's 2.1.0. So that's all we have to put in here, 2.1.0. So I added the archetype, and then you should have a new kind of drop down with it. And we're going to click the 2.1.0 here, and I am going to create a new project. I'm going to call it Demo Selenium, basically. And I'm just going to finish the project. So from here, Maven should kick off a build right away. If it doesn't, you can basically open up Maven, hit reload all Maven projects, and it should start doing a ton of the work. And just in case no one's really seen this IDE before, I'm going to briefly go over it. So I'm going to close this POM, but we have our project on the left here. And if we go into it a little bit, we're going to see we have our main and we have our tests. So we have now downloaded this archetype, created a brand new project, right? And we already have some things to look at. So we didn't even have to build anything. Maven automatically ran. Now I'm gonna kind of go from a testing layer down. So let's open up the example test we have in here. So in this test, let me make this a little bit bigger too. So in this test, we have a few methods, right? We have open page test, enter valid credentials test, enter invalid credentials test. So we have 3 tests already built here. And hopefully, if you're reading this, you're not looking at these tests and thinking they're very hard to read or that we're already really complicated, right? The goals of using a framework, one of them is to make things more readable for the tests, right? So we are able to open up a page test pretty simply, right? We're going to say, hey, I want a new login page model. Open that login page, and we're going to assert that's true. That's a pretty simple test case. So let me kind of dive in under the hood a couple ways. I think it's Control Shift B. I always forget how to use this one. Okay, so it's Control B. So let's kind of look at our base Selenium test. So in this, we're going to this is all Jmax now. This is all code that is already done and provided for you that you don't have to write yourself. So, in our example before, I said we'd probably want to create a base test file that we can use across our entire project that is going to do things such as allow us to get the driver and set that up easier. Well, I kind of was talking about Jmax the entire time, right? So if we look at this base Selenium test, we have methods to get the web driver, set up the web driver. All these things you're gonna probably want to do if you're creating a Selenium project are already here. So we have the before logging teardown. What I mentioned before, we have, get the browser, test object, and all that is already kind of initially set up. And let's kind of dive into the page model. So we're not going to look at anything crazy. We're going to look at kind of basic page model objects here. So let me click on the login page here. So we have one page model here. And the web page, I'm not going to pull it up and show it to you. It's pretty simple. You'll probably see it as the automation is going, but it's as simple as it's just a login page where we can enter a username and password. So we have a few things in here. We have the username in a lazy element. We'll talk about that in a moment. And same thing with the password input. And we have another lazy element for the error message and the login button. All right. So in this page object model, so those are all of our selectors basically. We'll look at lazy web element in a moment, but just assume those are selectors right now. And then we have our constructor, and then pretty standard page object model things. This is where you're going to create pretty custom code, right? How you want to test your application changes a lot. So these are basically just example methods, hopefully following good practices of things that we might want to do, like opening up the login page. I do want to call attention to one at the bottom. We have an is page loaded, which is, I believe, an abstract method that we're implementing here and overriding. We probably want to have a method that is going to return true or false if the page is loaded correctly. So we have a method down here. So before we get into lazy element, I want to just look at Selenium here. So our base Selenium page model has a lot in here. And a lot of this, it's longer than the test by a little bit. And we can even look at how much longer it could be as well. But we have a bunch of things already done in here. So things like our test object WebDriver, we're able to encapsulate in here. Some of the things that we saw in the testing layer, we have here as well. So we're able to get the WebDriver easily on our model because it's going to be initialized in the constructor. And then things like getting the lazy elements. So now I kind of want to talk about lazy elements. So lazy elements, lazy web element, apologies. Lazy web element is our way of kind of having that smart waiting and retrying whenever we're trying to interact with a page object. So a good example is if we go down to our method here. So 1 second, where am I? So this dot enter credentials, where's my enter credentials? Okay, perfect. So this is the line I was looking for. So this is a lazy element. So send keys is basically the same Selenium send keys, right? But we are actually going to be sending that to a lazy element. What the lazy element is going to do, we don't have to write a bunch of waits or retries when we're calling it from the page object model. Instead, we are going to basically build a class around that entire concept. So lazy web elements, you're able to just say click, send, things like that. We can find a ton of examples here. If we go into the abstract method, we can do things like click, right? I said that we can send secret keys. We're able to basically say, we want to click this, but we want to kind of keep retrying if it fails, right? Keep retrying for this. We want to log as we're trying to do it too, right? Because you might, for your automation, want to try to click a page and it might be taking a long time to load. So you don't want to fail your test the first time when it checks and it's not there right away. You want to keep retrying, but you probably want to know how many times it kind of took for that click to work, right? If it works right away or the 100th time, that does kind of make a difference. So we want some way of knowing. So we have logging built into our elements as well, and we we'll kind of keep retrying and things like that, just doing that basic wait. So I've gotten a little bit in the weeds here, but basically lazy element is an element we can just send those Selenium actions to, and it will keep retrying and do smart waiting. So I've kind of dived in quite a bit into basically page models and login tests, and I promised I'd run some tests. So let's do that. Keep in mind, I've actually not done anything. I've really just been showing you things. All we did was create a new project. I've yet to even truly hit a button or do anything. So let's do it. Let's run some tests. Oh, I forgot the one thing I wanted to do beforehand. So I am going to paste the driver in here after everything fails, and then let's rerun it now. I needed the Chrome web driver before we started our tests. So now that we have a Chrome web driver in there, you should hopefully be seeing the browser kind of open and the test start. So let me bring that up a little bit, and you can see here, and this is the test view, and we're running test ng tests. So we have our 3 tests here, and they all passed. So right out of the box, we already have working tests as long as you have your driver correctly, right? So, and that's all using the Jmax to make things even easier and faster, right? If you look at the example models and tests we have here, there's not a lot of code there. I know, like, we took an archetype and these are just example tests, but even if you're writing custom tests, it should go a lot faster. A lot of that setup's already done for you. You just hit a button, download it, and set up a new project from an archetype, and you already have working tests. By that point, it's basically just you can start finding and replacing, setting up to work for yours. So let's kind of start talking about that process. One of the other things I said is that it's highly configurable. So we have a config XML file right here, and let's just start looking at it a little bit. So we have some configurations in here, and we have kind of 2 different layers. In this example, we have the JMAQS, which has some things like how we want to log and what the logging level is. And then we have things such as our Selenium things. This is where we can change our browser. We can very easily switch between the 2. I'm going to keep it Chrome just for simplicity here. We have support for a browser stack, for example, things like that. You can easily change here. And then the browser resizing, all that stuff we have built in that we can easily change. So let's kind of start changing something. So I'll leave that for now. Let's change the logging level. So I'm going to rerun the test this time. So I can do that with this button here. It's going to rerun. So you notice we didn't have any logs that time. That's because by default, the log level is a little more detailed. I believe it was warning. So that'll happen when a test fails, basically. So now I have logs every single time on, and now we set our level to information. And now I want to show you the other thing I kind of mentioned that we kind of want in a framework, things like that. So I have our log here that since we're logging everything, it's going to write out all the information or below details. So we can already look at the built-in log. So it's saying that it's set up our test object. We're able to determine the browser that I have, Chrome, the version, all that, and exactly what the test is trying to do. So it checks to see if the lazy element username text field is displayed, and then it checked to see if the password was displayed. And we can see that for all the tests. This one is going a little bit longer and doing more things. So that's awesome. So let me kind of show you a different logging level. So verbose is where it's going to log everything. I'm going to rerun the exact same tests. So luckily, web UI, if you're not going in depth testing, can be very quick too. So we now have some different tests here. I believe it's going to be this one. Yep. So this is verbose now. We're going to get even more details. So we set it up, our local driver, all that stuff is here, but we also have things like this, verbose logging. So performing lazy driver find on and this. So you can see the by level that you're trying to search for, because you'll see here that this is more of like human speak. Like, I understand what password text field means, right? But if you want those details of exactly what by selector you're using, verbose will show you that, things like that. And a little bit more on configuration before we switch over to a completely different project. I want to just show you quick on fail. So what I'm going to do here is we'll throw it back on information probably, just to show some change here. And I'm just going to make a test fail by flipping the cert, right? We had it as true before, and now it's going to, the first test here is going to fail. So we should see 2 passing tests and 1 failing. So good. 2 have passed, and I believe this one should be the one that failed, and it did. So we have 1 failing test, and you'll see here that we don't have 3 logs of each, right? These 2 didn't log that time because they passed, but this time for our test here, it failed, and we're logging this one only. And that will also come with a screenshot, because once again, the configuration here will have things. So save, page source on fail, the screenshot, all that stuff is here as well. So highly configurable, and even things like how long we want to wait before we retry, or our timeout when we're doing those lazy loads, we can set here and have that be our global configuration. So great, that's a lot of stuff. So, and we're only looking at Selenium. I'm not going to go nearly in depth in the next one, but I just want to show you how easy it is to do another. So I'm going to do another project. We're going to create from archetype. And this time I already have it downloaded, but it works the same way. So you would just add the archetype using the com.magenic Jmax archetype. And here, I'll show it again. So we'd be doing it this way. And then we, instead of doing Selenium, we would want web services. So you just delete Selenium, web services, and then it's the same version that we want. So we're going to add that. Oh, and I mistyped it, so I'm glad I already have it downloaded. So if you type it right, you should wind up with this one. So, and then I'm going to do demo web services. and we are going to let that project build. And same as before, it's going to start building a ton of stuff as we go. And luckily, it's done kind of doing that Maven build. And lucky for us, web services are even simpler. I don't even need to copy a driver. I can just hit run here. 1 second. I think I might just have to hit rebuild here. Sure. Odd, interesting. Let me look at one of these here. Oh, I think I know. That should work now. I was hitting the play button here, but I have not ran a test yet in this project. So it was basically saying the test you're trying to run doesn't exist because that's from a different project. So sorry about that confusion. We ran our one test here and we're able to get our JSON deserialized and do a full test here. So just going into this a little bit, I'm not going to go nearly in depth as I did with Selenium, but it's the same concepts as before, right? So we want to do some stuff that, if we're testing web services on one project to another, we're going to want to do some of those like-minded things. So we have our base web service test is going to have some things like, setting up the web service client. That's something we're going to want to do. And then things such as the get content. Let's look at that method. So we have our web service driver here, and that is going to be doing a ton of things you're going to do against a lot of different web service projects, right? We want to be able to get the content. We want to be able to put, patch, post, all that. And we also want to deserialize. So 1 second here, I hit the wrong button. So we're able to quickly deserialize the bodies we get back so we can keep working with our page, not our page models, our JSON models here. So in the example I kind of showed here, this is getting something called a product from this endpoint. Get product, we're getting the first one. We're going to get that, and then we're just going to deserialize it, and we're going to assert that the ID is 1 as expected. And since the test ran and passed, we know that it worked here. So once again, all of this was just done very quickly from downloading the archetype and basically hitting play. We have a starting off point already. And then the configuration here looks largely the same. Some of the things you might want to change, like, for example, the endpoint here for the web services. So that's basically all I have to demo. Going back to the slides here. So next thing I want to show is just that documentation I said we'd look at before. So if you go to JMAQS here, a lot of kind of what I showed you and things like that is all fully documented. So if you're trying to furiously take notes on how to do all these things, luckily we have some documentation that should help with that. So you can just go to the open source GitHub page. It should be right under the README, and that should be able to link you directly to our documentation. And you can see here that we have things like talking about the logger. All that should be in here to help you get started using JMAQS even faster. So I want to basically open up for questions. We have about 5 minutes left, so we're at the end here, and does anyone have any questions?
No questions yet, Dustin, but lots of rounds of applause and thumbs up.
Wonderful. So I guess while we potentially wait, feel free to type them in chat. I said we'd have questions at the end, so I'll just kind of go on a bit more. But feel free to type questions and feel free to interrupt me as I'm kind of rambling here at the end. But like I said, JMAQS is open sourced and freely available and being developed. And if someone thinks this is cool and they have an idea to help improvement, it's open source. So feel free to make a branch, start working on it, get in touch with me. And I'd love to hear what people's ideas are for things like JMAX and ways that you can even improve something like this. Other things are just to kind of talk a bit more about JMAX. Like I said, I only showed 2 of the kind of modules I mentioned before. So that was just Selenium, that was just web services, but we, support Appium databases in Gherkin as well. So with Cucumber, so there's a ton of options and avenues out there, and it can be a tool that anyone can use to get to that value point of automation sooner. Why rework, right? In the tech field, don't repeat yourself, right? That's one of the major things we always talk about. Same is true in automation. Why repeat the setup? So I have nothing else. I'll just leave it open to questions if anyone has anything. All right. I didn't hear speak at all. So I will quickly just say thank you so much for letting me speak at Programmers Week. There's a ton of great stuff, especially for QE today. So turn into next, which is Paul, which is a great speaker as well. So thank you guys so much for having me, and good luck creating quality automation sooner in the future. Thank you.